G'day, Rob Russ here, and welcome to The Unspoken Truth. If this is your first time here, welcome, and if you're back for more, welcome back, and thank you for your ongoing support. In this video, I'm going to unpick Linda Burney's speech to the National Press Club, and I'm going to show you how she lied to the Australian population in front of the entire media of Australia, and not a single person called her out. I'm going to call her out. This idea of the voice to Parliament is the most divisive policy ever created by any political party in Australian history. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly why I'm voting no. Before I kick off, I want to give you the context of this video. Now, I watched Linda's speech in an attempt to hear the other side and maybe be convinced that voting yes would be a good idea. Perhaps there was something to learn, but I had my hopes up for no reason, and instead of being swayed to the other side and changing my mind, she's highlighted just what a flawed idea the voice to Parliament actually is, and she's confirmed exactly why I'll be voting no. Take a look and let me know if you agree with any of the points that I make, and if you're going to be voting yes instead. I'd love to hear your side of it as well. Just remember that if you vote yes, the division that we're seeing now in Australian society is only going to be amplified, and no one is talking about any of that. Let's get started.
That historic First Nations consensus on the way forward, where 250 Indigenous leaders and elders gathered in the red dirt at Uluru to issue the statement from the heart.
2 years ago, news travelled through the Aboriginal grapevine that the Uluru mob were not happy about the statement. The Pitjantjatjara and Yankunytjatjara are the traditional owners of the land that Chukara, Uluru, sits on. Numerous elders were shocked when they learnt that their names appeared on the canvas that they didn't endorse nor want. The canvas is Aboriginal term for document. The elders want the Australian public to know about the lie that is being sold to them as factual.
Uluru had no problem, number one. Number one, well, problem we are with the under the regional owner, and when the campus come in from Sally's Kyle, and he called a statement, and they didn't put a campus, and they didn't say like that. This is a statement for Uluru. Because that statement might get a tight. What tight they put it in, that statement? Tight. Uluru got no tight for all the regional owner. Tight way there. By himself. And we gotta break that campus and say we break him, this one, this is a troublemaker. Campus venture, we got to break him. This no meaning, this campus, no meaning. Only all these people from they know every story right around East Rock. That's the law, East Rock, for all the regional owner. And that, if I got that campus now, I can burn him. This campus is a troublemaker. Because that sugar now, that campus is causing a lot of problem for us now today.
This means that the Uluru Statement from the Heart is a fraudulent document that has been pushed onto every Australian as representing the will of the Aboriginal people. Aboriginal in-groups have taken to Twitter, creating short videos with a simple message: we vote no.
We vote no! We vote no! We vote no!
The idea of constitutional recognition through a voice is what Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have asked for themselves.
The Uluru Statement from the Heart was orchestrated by Thomas Mayo. Thomas Mayo, by his own admission, likes the communist-style regime and will be asking for rent, repatriations to be paid by the Australian people, and the end game is money, power, control, and the elimination of our current system of government.
The first question I want to address today is, why is the voice needed? And the simple answer is because the gap isn't closing fast enough.
Now, this is what I hear, and I think I'm a pretty reasonable and normal person just like you. The gap isn't closing fast enough. Well, my view is that the socialist policies of past governments and the endless handouts of billions of dollars simply don't work. And that seems to be the one thing that everybody agrees upon. But here's the thing that no one wants to acknowledge and nobody's saying out aloud. I'll say the quiet part out loud for you. It's an undeniable fact that socialism has never, ever worked. Whether it's here in Australia in the indigenous population or some other place on earth. You can't point to another country anywhere and say, look, that's a socialist country, that worked. The endless handouts and interventions that we've had here in Australia, even with billions of taxpayer dollars, has done nothing to change the situation. And that's because the people that are in charge of those handouts are willfully blind to their socialist behaviour. Here's a reminder of when the government stepped in, not the Australian government, but when a government stepped in with socialist policies because they thought they knew better and it just didn't work. See if you recognise a story that you've probably heard before. Now, during Mao Zedong's leadership in China, he implemented various socialist policies aimed at transforming the agricultural sector. These policies ultimately failed and they had significant consequences. Now, I want you to listen closely. This is not what's going to happen in Australia, but listen closely to the components of the story. One of the key components of the Great Leap Forward was the establishment of agricultural communes, where collective farming and communal living were enforced on a massive scale. Private property rights were abolished, and the peasants were organised into large-scale communes that aimed to increase agricultural productivity through communal labour, shared resources, and centralised planning. Does any of that sound familiar to you? These policies had disastrous consequences. The implementation of the communes disrupted traditional agricultural practices and caused widespread chaos. Peasants were forced to abandon their small-scale plots and work in large collective farms, often leaving insufficient time and resources for cultivating their personal plots. The centralised planning and production targets imposed by the government led to unrealistic goals, exaggerated reporting, and a misallocation of resources. Ultimately, the failure of the agricultural collectivisation led to a decline in agricultural output, causing shortages of food and other essential commodities. This, coupled with the negative consequences of the Great Leap Forward, contributed to widespread famine and suffering across China, where up to 45 million people died. Folks, that's what happens when the government thinks it knows better. Now, we haven't had a famine here in Australia and nobody's going to die. I'm not suggesting any of that for a second. But we have spent billions and billions of dollars and we all seem to agree that it's not very effective. And that's because socialism simply doesn't work. Top-down control of the nuances of society doesn't work. So what's the alternative then? Well, in my view, it's pretty simple, and it's personal responsibility. Imagine if a person was receiving a handout from the government and that handout suddenly stopped. That person would then have no choice but to take complete and total responsibility for their actions. We all have to do that because we don't have the option of the government giving us money and giving us a handout. We've got to take responsibility for ourselves. Like you, I live in this law-abiding society, and if I do the wrong thing, then I'll get in trouble with the law. And likewise, if I do the right thing and I have a go, then I'm going to be rewarded. That's the beauty of our country. You're going to be rewarded for your hard work. But if you want to leech off the taxpayer, and you want people to leech off the taxpayer, then all you're going to get is lazy people that pretend to work and pretend to care. And then they complain that the handout that they get isn't enough to live on. This is socialism, folks. And that's what's failed so far. And that's what's going to continue to fail forever because it doesn't work. No matter which way you try it, no matter which way you frame it, it has never worked in any society ever. Why can't people take responsibility for their own actions? I have to take responsibility for my actions and I'm rewarded or penalised by the meritocracy that we live in. Why does less than 4% of the Australian population have the right to take no responsibility for their actions while getting handouts from the government? While the rest of us have got to take personal responsibility for absolutely everything that we do. Linda doesn't seem to realise the hypocrisy of her own words. She wants the voice to advise on how to do things better, but the irony is that she's taken great personal responsibility for herself and now finds herself in a fantastic position where she can make a real difference to the things that matter to her. And guess what? That reward has all been based upon her merit. I don't know the woman, but I'm certain that she had to work really hard to get to where she is. And I'm willing to bet that she works really, really hard every single day to stay there as well. So why is it then that she suggests that other people in Australia be held to a different standard to you or to me or even to her? It makes no sense at all.
For far too long, governments have made policies for Indigenous Australians, not with Indigenous Australians. We need a voice to change that. We need the voice because we need to work in partnership with communities. We need a voice because we need to do better.
We need to do better? Why are you trying to guilt me into saying yes? I didn't do anything wrong and I don't feel responsible for the so-called sins of the past. You're trying to make me and every other Australian feel guilty by saying we need to do better. We don't need to do anything because we haven't done anything wrong. And that's because we're all too busy taking personal responsibility for our own personal actions. Why is it that the government is making specific policies for a given group of people anyway? The hard, unspoken truth is that that's a socialist idea. The government seems to think that it knows better than the group. So it makes a policy, throws millions and billions of dollars at it, it fails, and then they wonder why. That's because the government doesn't know what's best for the group, and money is not going to solve the problem. A voice to Parliament won't solve the problem either. And that's because it's just an extension of what the government is currently doing. And their socialist policies have currently failed, and they're going to continue to fail. Why would the voice know any better than the government currently does? The answer is they won't. How could they? The people that designed the Great Leap Forward in China wanted what was best for their country as well. But what they got in return was an economy that was in total ruins and 45 million dead people. Now, I'm not saying that that's going to happen here, not for 1 minute, folks. What I'm doing is I'm highlighting that all of this has already been tried before and it's completely failed. It was tried in the Soviet Union, it was tried in China, it was tried in a bunch of different places on Earth, and it doesn't work. Socialist ideas seem really good, but in practice, they've never, ever worked anywhere.
But our young people don't start on a level playing field. They need hope.
That's a lie, folks. It's simply not true. My children were born here in Australia. I was born here in Australia, the same as every other Australian that was. There is no time in a person's life where the playing field is more level than when you were born. If you were born in Afghanistan or South Sudan, then your playing field is certainly different to mine. But to suggest that Indigenous kids are not born with the same opportunities as every other Australian child is a lie. She's lying to you. This woman is lying to you. And notice how she says they also need hope. Hope for what? Does my newborn daughter need hope too? What about your newborn son? Does he need hope, or does he need less hope because he's not Indigenous? What she's saying is not only a lie, it's absolutely and completely ridiculous.
Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are 55 times more likely to die from rheumatic heart disease than non-Indigenous people. These deaths are completely preventable.
Well, Minister, if it's preventable, why don't you do something about it? What has a voice to Parliament got to do with somebody's personal health issue? The answer is absolutely nothing. All she's doing here, folks, is trying to get you to feel guilty about somebody else's heart problems. But I don't feel guilty. I feel empathy, but I can't do anything about any of that. But Linda is the minister and she's in a position right now where she can help these people. A voice to Parliament is not required to help these people, but she's complaining about something she can fix right now.
Indigenous young people are 24 times more likely to be locked up than their neighbours.
Aussies are way smarter than what Linda thinks. If a group of people are 24 times more likely to get in trouble, it says to me that they have no respect for the rule of law. The rest of us are law-abiding citizens who do the right thing, help each other, and take responsibility for ourselves. Why then should Indigenous people be treated any differently than the rest of us? This is another way of her trying to make a point and trying to make you feel guilty about the status of the prison population. But here's the thing, 99.9% of people would expect that if somebody breaks the law, regardless of who they are, the full force of the law would be applied to them. Everyone in our society agrees to this in principle, and that's exactly why we live in peace and security. I don't feel guilt or shame for a second that Indigenous people are 24 times more likely to get into trouble. The answer is simple. Follow the law like everybody else and stay out of trouble. No minister, no politician, or any voice to Parliament could ever make me feel guilty that a particular group of people represent a higher proportion of the prison population than others. Don't break the law and you won't get locked up. It's as simple as that.
First Nations children represent 37% of all children removed from their parents, but make up only 6% of Australia's children. This number is unacceptably high. And yet the number of Indigenous children living in out-of-home care is expected to double in the next 6 years. And this cannot because we have no love for them.
What on earth has any of that got to do with me, the government of Australia, or a voice to Parliament? If parents cannot care for their children, as with crime, a normal, reasonable person would expect that somebody with the right authority steps in and helps that kid. Why would a voice to Parliament help with any of that? Does the government know better than a parent? Of course not. But if a parent refuses to take responsibility for themselves and their child, then somebody should step in and help. If Indigenous families are more likely to have their kids taken away, all that suggests to me is that the parents either cannot care for their kids or they refuse to take responsibility for themselves. No government body or voice to Parliament will solve the problem of people not taking personal responsibility for themselves. It won't. It cannot. It hasn't until now, and it won't be any different if the voice to Parliament gets up. Remember when China had a one-child policy? They thought that it would be a good idea, and the idiot communists in charge thought that they knew better than families. And look what that's done to the population right now. It's created a massive demographic problem in Chinese society because the government thought that it knew better than parents and families. Are you kidding me? No government knows better than any parent, and the voice to Parliament won't know any better either. If people don't take responsibility for themselves, then no amount of money, no amount of committees or goodwill will ever solve the problem. You're living in the land of unicorns and rainbows if you think otherwise.
The suicide rate of our people is almost twice the rate of our fellow Australians.
Again, she's stating facts to try and make me feel guilty. But I don't feel guilt or shame. I feel empathy for someone with mental health issues, but I don't feel any guilt that the statistics are higher than whatever it is that she's comparing it to. On top of all of that, what has that got to do with a voice to Parliament? The government cannot solve mental health issues, someone's depression problem, or the suicidal thoughts that somebody is having. The only people that can do that are mental health professionals. You're living in an absolute dream world if you think the voice to Parliament is ever going to solve that problem. The government can't solve one mental health problem at a time. She's using statistics to try and alarm me and to make me feel shame and guilt, so I act and I vote yes. But I don't feel shame or guilt about something I can't control, and I also know that the government can't solve that problem. Neither can the voice to Parliament. That's why trying to shame me and other Australians into voting yes simply won't work.
Just last month, we saw new data that showed 4 of the 19 closing the gap targets were on track. Just 4 out of 19. Life expectancy, not on track. Indigenous babies born with healthy birth weights, not on track. Finishing year 12, not on track. Indigenous people engaged in jobs and training, not on track. If we needed any more evidence that more of the same isn't good enough, then this is it.
Only 4 of the 19 closing the gaps points were working? Well, that's because socialism simply doesn't work. No amount of money, no amount of committees, and no voice to Parliament will make any difference or close that gap because socialist policies simply don't work. They were never going to work, and it's no surprise that they haven't. And I don't understand why she's so surprised that it's not working. Let's unpick what she's saying for a second. She talks about life expectancy. Straight up, folks, that is personal responsibility. It's your job as a human being to eat healthy and to exercise to prolong your life. Ditch the booze, stop smoking, stop taking pharmaceutical medicine, and you'll be on track. That's personal responsibility. Next thing she talks about is babies being underweight. Again, that's personal responsibility. Pregnant women need to eat properly, they need to take care of themselves, and they need to do all the things that are recommended by medical professionals to increase the likelihood that their baby is going to be born at a healthy weight. The voice to Parliament can't fix that. Are you kidding me? Completing Year 12. Again, personal responsibility. It's up to the individual to decide what they want to do with their lives. If they want to stay at school, they will. If they want to leave, then they will. How is the voice to Parliament ever going to change what a kid wants to do? Jobs and training. Again, this is the worst one. That's all about personal responsibility. If you want a job, you can get one. If you won't leave and go to another area and move where there is jobs, then you probably don't want one that badly. And if the government is giving you a handout, that's probably the reason why. I don't believe that low job participation is a result of being Indigenous for a second. 100% of that is personal responsibility, and no voice to Parliament will ever solve someone being too lazy to go to work or to look for a job. The alternative with the voice to Parliament is maintaining the status quo of where you are, keeping the socialist policies in place and keeping people lazy because they'll stay right where they are because they don't have to look for a job because they're getting a handout from the government. Why does Linda think that the government and a voice to Parliament will suddenly take personal responsibility for life expectancy, underweight babies, education, and getting a job? The irony, again, it seems to be completely lost on her. She admitted that almost all of the things that have been tried have failed dismally, but she wants a voice to Parliament to try new things to solve these problems. But the issue is not a lack of goodwill from her or from other people, it's the undeniable fact that socialist policies don't work. And the socialist policies that they've tried still don't work. But she's continuing to propose a voice to Parliament, which is just an extension of what's not working. The only person that's going to make this work is the individual on the ground. They must take personal responsibility for themselves. And if you want it to really work, then you've got to set the conditions as the government to make that work. But using socialist policies to try and control people with money is doomed to fail. That's why the voice to Parliament won't work or be any more effective than the current system that we have.
The great leader of the Gummidge clan of northeastern Arnhem, the late Yunupingu, once said, "They do not listen because they do not have to." It was the truth. Governments don't have to listen, whether it be local, state or federal governments. Every state, territory, the Torres Strait Islands and remote communities will be represented.
We all voting no because it's not something that we chose to do or anything like that, because we are our own individual voices. Every tribe is their own individual voices. You can't talk for anybody else's because you don't own their lands. That's one of the points I'm trying to make.
Let's say a local community identifies a problem like low school attendance. The community identifies that this is a challenge and wants to explore local solutions to improve school attendance. So the community approaches their representative on the voice and raises this issue with them. The voice then has the power to make representations on how to improve school attendance at the local community level to government and the Parliament. It's about linking up the local decision-making and local knowledge with policymakers and government.
We're right back in the land of unicorns and fairies. Every single school in Australia already has a truancy policy. If kids are absent, they jig school, or they just don't go to school, schools already have policies in place to resolve these issues. If those policies don't work, then what could a school possibly be expected to do? They're not enforcers of some hypothetical law, nor can they compel anyone to do anything. The onus of attendance at school remains firmly on the child. And if the child's not attending for whatever reason, then the parents are responsible for making sure the child goes to school. How is the voice to Parliament going to get a 14-year-old kid out of bed in the morning, get them breakfast, force them to wear their school uniform, get them on a bus and send them to school? And when they get there, they turn around and don't even go in the front gate. The voice to Parliament's not going to solve that. This is the problem with socialist policies and the policies that are currently in place and the policies that the voice to Parliament will extend. The problem is that socialist policies don't work, and ignorant people that are trying to employ these policies are wondering why it's not working. It's because socialism doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is because you can't control a person's mind. That's why it doesn't work. The voice to Parliament is not going to solve the problem of truancy. Are you kidding me? No amount of community consultation, changing the rules, or even making new laws was going to solve that. The only way to solve truancy and that problem of truancy is if the child and the parents of that child take personal responsibility for attendance. The voice to Parliament is never ever going to solve this problem.
Residents of remote communities have told me they want skills to work as mechanics and to run the local butcher or the bakery. But despite asking for this, despite wanting to work to improve their community, governments have failed to listen.
It's hard to believe that she wants all of us to swallow that it's the government's fault that someone hasn't received the training that they want. It's not the government's responsibility to give you what you want. It's up to you to go and get what you want. She's trying to make us all feel guilty that the government didn't listen. But it's not the job of the government or the hypothetical voice to train people in the exact courses that they want with no exceptions. All my life, I wanted to be a pilot. I didn't ring up Centrelink and say, hey, I want to be an airline pilot. Can you do it for me? Can you pay for it as well? I got off my ass, I went and got a job, I saved my money, I brought the books, I studied my ass off, and I paid for the training like everybody else. We're so lucky here in Australia, the Labor government has done a good job and offered literally thousands of free places in TAFE. My daughter is the lucky recipient of some of that fantastic training, and when I tell my American friends about that, they simply can't believe it. We have an amazing vocational training system here in Australia, and the government does a great job of supporting people that want to work. And that if you want to get more skills and advance your job and your career, they're going to give you that for free. It's incredible. But again, it's up to you to seek that out as an individual. It's not up to the government to come to you and listen to what it is that you want. You've got to go and get it. If there's a course that you want to do and it's not available in your area, even if you're in a remote area, then it's up to you to get off your lazy ass and go where there is one. That's what a normal person would do. They wouldn't sit there complaining that there's no other courses, no butcher's courses or mechanics courses or some baker's course that you want to do. You'd go and find that course and you'd go and do it like a normal person. If they really wanted that, they would seek it out. And Linda is making out that every Indigenous Australian person is a victim of the government's lack of training and opportunities. But nothing could be further from the truth because the government already has thousands and thousands of incredible training opportunities. We truly are the lucky country when it comes to that. But Linda wants you to feel shame and guilt because a course isn't available in some remote part of Australia. Give me a break.
Now, I also want to say a few words about the No campaign. The No campaign is being run by a group called Fair Australia. It is importing Trump-style politics to Australia. It is post-truth, and its aim is to polarise. Its aim is to sow division in our society by making false claims.
I find it so strange that Linda would say that the opposite view of something is a false claim. She's attempting to discredit people that don't agree with her. But here in this video, I've proven to you how she's lying to the Australian population at the National Press Club. I sat here for hours making this video, listening to her and unpicking the hype, the fear, the guilt, and the shame and her terrible delivery in an attempt to possibly be swayed into the yes camp. Now, forget about her really weak arguments, the falsehoods, and the lie that she's already told us. The socialist idea that the voice will be any better than the current method is just completely flawed. Socialism has never worked, and pretending that the voice to Parliament will solve everything from truancy to training is a dream in fairy la la land. There's no doubt that she wants what's best for Indigenous people, but why can't she want what's best for all of us as well? Instead, she seeks to divide us by saying that someone that doesn't agree with her is spreading false information. But I'm not the one lying to the Australian public at the National Press Club. She is.
Do not let no campaign get away with using Trump-style politics in Australia. Do not let them divide us. Do not let them divide us.
It's hard to believe that she's so willfully blind to her statement, "Don't let them divide us." It's the leftist socialist idea of the voice to Parliament that's dividing us. More than half the country disagrees with it because it's so damn divisive. Australians want to be treated equally, fairly, and to be left alone. Australians want their government to stand up for them and to be there for them when times are tough. Politicians are elected to represent people, but it's completely lost on this woman that the idea of the voice to Parliament is doing the opposite of what the government is meant to do. You're meant to be there to serve us and to represent us. But it's now becoming clear that the voice to Parliament is something that the people just don't want. Now they're moving towards an arrogant name-calling approach. And what you're going to do when you do that, when you're using those divisive leftist strategies and tactics, you're only going to divide Australians even more. I don't like being called names because I disagree with you, but if you do that, you're going to divide us more. Linda is so blind that she thinks that Trump-style politics, whatever that is, will divide us. And she's so unbelievably blind that she can't see that it's not Trump-style politics that's dividing us. It's the voice to Parliament that's dividing all of us.
No, look, I think they've got to be very careful with that. I mean, of course, not every no voter is a racist, although every racist is going to vote no.
Now, this is American-style politics where the left calls people racist because they simply don't agree with them. It doesn't pass the pub test here in Australia. Imagine if I was in a pub with a group of 10 of my mates and we're all going to vote no. Do you think that this guy is going to come over to me and have the guts to call me racist to my face because I decided I was going to vote no? Of course he wouldn't. What it shows to me is it shows the complete willful blindness of the left to their socialist policies. The voice to Parliament doesn't know what's going to be best for its people. It doesn't represent those people because it's not elected. They're going to be appointed. And as we've already heard, there's no way that an appointed Indigenous body could represent Indigenous people. Just because the yes vote is calling me a racist doesn't mean I'm going to vote yes. They think that they can guilt and shame me into something, all the while forgetting that I don't feel guilt or shame about any of this because I'm simply not responsible for any of it. I feel empathy, for sure, but as I said, no amount of name-calling is ever going to get me to vote for another socialist policy like the voice to Parliament.
Proportionally, we are the most incarcerated people on the planet. We are not an innately criminal people. Our children are alienated from our families at unprecedented rates. This cannot be because we have no love for them. Our youth languish in detention in obscene numbers. They should be our hope for the future. These dimensions of our crisis tell plainly the structural nature of our problem. This is the torment of our powerlessness. We seek constitutional reforms to empower our people to take a rightful place in our own country. When we have the power over our destiny, our children will flourish. They will walk in two worlds, and their culture will be a gift to this country.
Well, if you're all locked up, stop breaking the damn law. It's as simple as that. The people that are in jail are not there because they're underprivileged victims. They're there because they broke the law. To try and make something else of it is to excuse someone for their crime. If anyone else breaks the law, then society expects that they're treated exactly the same way. There's no two-tiered justice system where Indigenous people can break the law, claim victim status, and be absolved of their crimes. Are you kidding me? The voice to Parliament will never ever fix this problem. It's someone's personal choice to commit a crime, and no amount of talking will ever save someone from themselves. If children are alienated at unprecedented rates, as Linda is claiming, then that's the fault of the parents, not the fault of the government. How can the government control the behaviour of a parent? They can't. But Linda is implying that the voice to Parliament will solve these issues, and that's completely false. It will never ever solve these problems. Social problems around families and mental health problems can't be solved by socialist government policies. They can only be solved by mental health professionals. If the youth are in detention, then that's because they've broken the law as well. This has absolutely nothing to do with community or the voice to Parliament. How can the government be responsible for the youth languaging in detention? I don't feel any guilt or shame for another person that's broken the law. I feel empathy for their plight, for sure. But if you break the law, then you get exactly what you ask for, and you'll get exactly what you deserve. The youth that are in detention are not victims, they're criminals. Folks, none of this is the torment of Indigenous people, as Linda is suggesting. The collective didn't do any of this to any of these people, and to suggest otherwise is another disingenuous lie. Everything she's describing is a product of poor individual decision making. We live in a country where you can choose to be whatever you want and to have whatever you want. No one person is more important than another, and no group of people, indigenous or not, should receive special treatment. Folks, it's a fatal mistake to embrace the socialist ideology where the state seeks to control behaviour, speech, and your personal autonomy. For the people that are planning to vote yes, before you do, I urge you to go and read the most important book that's ever been written. It's called The Gulag Archipelago. If you can stomach it, you'll quickly discover that much of what's been proposed in the Voice to Parliament has already been tried and it's failed dismally. And the result of the Soviet experiment is millions of lives were lost. Now, we're not going to lose lives here in Australia. I'm not suggesting that. But if you vote yes to this, then what it's going to do is change this country into haves and have-nots. And our society is going to become even more divided than it is right now. If you think that the division that you're seeing now is crazy, just imagine how polarizing politics is going to become and how crazy the public discussion is going to be if this goes through. You need to go and look at the Gulag Archipelago to learn the lessons of centralised control. It doesn't work, and the Voice to Parliament is an extension of the centralised control that's failing right now. We don't need any more division or lies from politicians here in Australia. What we need is leadership that stays out of our day-to-day lives and gets on with managing the economy and setting the proper conditions for all of us to prosper. So far, all the Labor government has done with this Voice to Parliament is drive a wedge between everyday Australians over something that creates no jobs. It doesn't reduce our debt and is slowly destroying the very fabric of our amazing society. Let me close out today, folks, by reminding you of a few lines of our national anthem, which you know well. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. Do you really think that in this page of Australia's history, we're advancing Australia fair? If the Voice to Parliament goes through, then it sure doesn't seem like it to me.